The market was loud that day. Shouts of merchants, the clatter of metal pots, and the smell of spices mixed with the stink of sweat and animals. Under a large red dandelion canopy, a fat alien merchant stood proudly behind a wooden platform. And on that platform, chained by the neck, stood the wildest creature in the market. She was young, maybe in her early 20s, by human guess. Her skin was a deep, glowing blue that caught the light like water. Her hair was a wild mess of green strands falling down her back. Her eyes burned bright gold, sharp like a predator. Her bare feet were dirty, her wrists bruised from metal cuffs, and she never stopped, pulling at the chain. Every jerk of her head made the merchant pull harder. "This one is strong," the merchant shouted. "She can work. She can fight. She can serve." But the crowd laughed. They knew her, the alien girl who had been sold 3 times, and always returned. Too violent, too stubborn, too dangerous. One alien in the front jeered. "She bit my cousin's arm off." The merchant laughed nervously. A small accident. Then he turned to her, trying to force her jaw open so buyers could see her teeth. "Open your mouth," he ordered. She growled low, a sound that made even the closest aliens take a step back. But the merchant didn't care. He grabbed her chin, squeezed hard. Her eyes flashed, and in a blur, she bit down, hard. The sound of teeth sinking into flesh was loud. The merchant screamed, a high, ugly sound. Blood spilled onto the wooden platform. The girl didn't let go, not until he smashed his other hand against her face. She spit his finger out onto the ground. The market froze. Even the animals in cages went quiet. Dozens of eyes turned to look, some in shock, some in disgust, and many in cruel amusement. "She's mad," someone shouted. "She's a beast." Another laughed. A few children threw pebbles at her. She stood still, breathing hard, her lips wet with the merchant's blood. Her golden eyes swept across the crowd, daring anyone to come closer. And that's when he saw her, from the shadow of a cloth tent. A human man watched, tall, broad shoulders, with the rough face of someone who had seen too many battles. He wore a worn leather coat, dust on his boots, and a quiet expression that gave nothing away but his eyes. His eyes didn't look at her with disgust. They looked at her like she was something rare, something valuable. The merchant, still clutching his bleeding hand, shouted, "Half price. Take her. I don't care anymore." The crowd roared with laughter. "Half price. You should pay someone to take her." A voice called out, "She'll kill whoever buys her." Another added. The human stepped forward. The laughter died down as he walked to the front. He didn't look at the merchant. His eyes stayed on the girl. Her glare met his, fierce and ready for another fight. "I'll take her," he said. The merchant blinked. "What? Are you mad?" I'll take her," the human repeated, his voice steady. No bargaining, no hesitation. The merchant stared at him. "She bite you like she bit me." The human shrugged. "Then I'll keep my hands away from her teeth." Gasps and murmurs spread through the crowd. No one understood why a human would pay for her, but the human reached into his coat, pulled out a heavy pouch of coins, and dropped it on the merchant's table. The merchant's eyes widened. It was more than half price. "Take her," he muttered quickly, shoving the chain into the human's gloved hand. The human looked at the chain, then at her. Without a word, he unlocked the shackle from her neck and dropped it on the ground. A ripple of shock went through the crowd. The girl's eyes narrowed. She stepped closer, testing him. Her body was tense, her lips curling into a half snarl. She lunged, not to escape, but to bite. The human moved faster than she expected, stepping aside and letting her stumble forward. When she turned, he was smiling slightly. "Walk," he said simply, "if you want food. Stay, if you want chains." She froze. This was not how buyers spoke. They usually pulled, hit, or shouted. But this man was calm, almost bored. And for some reason she couldn't explain, his words stayed in her head. The crowd watched as she hesitated. Then, slowly, she stepped forward. Following him out of the market, people whispered behind them, some in disbelief, some betting how long before she attacked him, but the human didn't look back. And the girl didn't stop walking. The bite had stopped the market, but what happened next would silence the city. The crowd's noise faded behind them as the human led the alien girl through the narrow streets. He didn't pull her, didn't shove her, just walked with long, steady steps. She followed, but not because she trusted him. She followed because she was curious, and because she wanted to know why he had freed her from the chain. The market air changed to the smell of damp stone and smoke from cooking fires. Tall wooden buildings leaned over the road, their windows cracked and dirty. Stray animals darted between piles of trash. She kept glancing over her shoulder, expecting the merchant or the guards to come running after them, but no one did. Finally, she spoke, her voice sharp. "Why did you buy me?" The human didn't slow, didn't look at her, didn't like how they treated you. He said simply. She frowned. "You expect me to serve you?" "No," he said. "I expect you to eat, sleep, and decide if you want to stay." The answer made her chest tighten in a way she didn't understand. No one had ever given her a choice before. Still, she didn't trust him. Kindness from strangers always came with a price. She had learned that the hard way. They reached a small house on the edge of the city. It was old but sturdy, with wooden walls and a roof patched in several places. He opened the door and stepped aside. She hesitated on the threshold, sniffing the air. It smelled of wood smoke, leather, and something warm. Food. Inside, the room was simple, a table with 2 chairs, shelves with tools and jars, a fireplace where a pot simmered. The human took off his coat and gloves, moving like this was just another day. "Sit," he said, pointing to the table. She didn't move. Her eyes darted to the door, to the windows, to the knife on the counter. He didn't block her view. He just started ladling stew into 2 bowls. When he set one in front of her, the smell made her stomach twist painfully. She hadn't eaten a full meal in days, but she remembered every trick the merchants used, drugging food, poisoning it, making captives weak. She narrowed her eyes. "You eat first." Without a word, he sat down, picked up a spoon, and took a slow bite, then another. Only then did she grab the bowl and start eating. She didn't use the spoon. She lifted the bowl and drank. The thick stew ran down her chin, but she didn't care. She swallowed fast. Afraid he might take it away, he didn't. When she finished, she slammed the empty bowl down and stared at him. "Why?" she asked again. This time, he met her eyes. "Because you looked like you needed someone to stop pulling on your chain." She didn't know what to say. The words made her angry, but also something else, something she didn't want to admit. After a while, she pushed back from the table and stood. Her muscles were tense again, ready to run. The human didn't move to stop her. "If you leave now, the market will chain you again," he said. "If you stay here tonight, no one will touch you." Her fists tightened. She hated the market, hated the chains, but she hated the idea of owing someone even more. Still, she sat back down, crossing her arms like she was only doing it because she chose to. The human began cleaning the bowls. She watched him, trying to figure him out. He didn't talk much, didn't brag, didn't try to impress her. That was strange. Most buyers wanted to show their power. This man seemed like he didn't need to. When night came, he pulled a blanket from a chest and set it on the small bed in the corner. "You can take the bed," he said. She glared. "Where will you sleep?" "On the floor," he said, as if it didn't matter. She narrowed her eyes, waiting for him to laugh or tell her it was a joke, but he just laid down by the fireplace and closed his eyes. For a long time, she sat on the edge of the bed, staring at him. She thought about the merchant's blood on her lips, the chain falling to the ground, the human's calm eyes. Something about him didn't fit into her world, and she hated not knowing why. When the fire burned low, she lay down and pulled the blanket around her. She told herself she was only staying because it was warm, but deep down, she knew there was another reason, and it had nothing to do with the bed. Morning light slipped through the cracks in the wooden shutters. The alien girl opened her eyes slowly, not used to waking without the sound of chains. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then she saw the human, already awake, crouched by the fireplace. The smell of something cooking filled the room. Her stomach tightened instantly, reminding her she hadn't eaten since last night's stew. He didn't look at her right away. Instead, he stirred the pot with calm, slow movements. Steam rose into the air, carrying the scent of roasted meat and some sweet spice she didn't recognize. Her eyes followed every turn of the spoon. She hated herself for how hungry she was. "What is it?" she finally asked, her voice low. "Breakfast," he said, not turning. She narrowed her eyes. "For you, or for me?" "For both," he replied, as if the answer was obvious. When he poured the food into 2 wooden bowls, she didn't move. She remembered every bad thing she'd learned about kindness. It was usually bait. He set 1 bowl in front of her, and sat down with his own. "You eat first," she said. He raised 1 eyebrow, but took a bite without complaint. Then another, slow and steady, until she finally reached for her own. It was different from last night's stew, richer, softer, almost sweet. The taste surprised her so much that she paused after the first mouthful. The human said nothing, just kept eating like it was nothing special. She wanted to ask what the spice was, but pride kept her silent. Instead, she ate faster, afraid she'd want more when it was gone. Halfway through the meal, she noticed something strange. The human was watching her, not with suspicion, but with curiosity. "What?" she snapped. "You eat like you're running from someone," he said calmly. She froze, then glared. Old habits. He didn't push the subject, but the way he looked at her made her skin feel hot. When the bowls were empty, she sat back, crossing her arms. She didn't thank him. She wasn't ready for that. But she also didn't insult him, which for her was almost the same thing. He began packing a small leather bag. "Where are you going?" she asked. "To the market," he said. "We need supplies." "We?" she echoed sharply. He shrugged. "Unless you plan to starve while I'm gone." Her jaw tightened. Part of her wanted to refuse, to stay inside, and not be seen by anyone. But another part of her wanted to see the market again, this time without a chain around her neck. She stood. "Fine. But if anyone tries to touch me, they won't," he interrupted. "Not while I'm there." On the way to the market, she kept her head high, scanning every corner. The crowd moved around them, some giving them curious glances. It was impossible not to notice. The wild alien girl who had bitten a merchant's finger now walked beside a human. Whispers followed them like shadows. Some voices were mocking, others nervous. She ignored them all, though her fingers twitched as if ready for a fight. The human stopped at a spice vendor, haggling quietly for a small jar while he talked. She drifted toward a stall selling fresh fruit. A round, red one caught her eye. She reached for it, but the alien vendor slapped her hand away. "No touching unless you pay," he barked. Her eyes narrowed, ready to snap back. But before she could, the human stepped between them. He placed a coin on the table, picked up the fruit, and handed it to her without a word. The vendor's mouth opened to say something, but one look at the human made him think better of it. She held the fruit in her hand. It was warm from the sun, the skin smooth. She bit into it, juice running down her chin. For a few moments, she forgot the crowd, forgot the stares. It tasted better than anything she'd had in months. As they left the market, she asked quietly, "Why did you do that?" "Because you wanted it," he said simply. Her steps slowed. Most people in her life had only given her what they thought she deserved, never what she wanted. It felt strange. Back at the house, she put the fruit core on the table and sat without being told. He stored the supplies, moving with the same calm rhythm as always. Finally, she asked the question that had been in her mind since yesterday. "What do you want from me?" He turned to her, meeting her eyes. "Nothing," he said. She didn't believe him, but for the first time, She wanted to. That night, as the fire warmed the small room, she lay on the bed again. She told herself she was only staying until she found a better place. But deep inside, she knew the truth. She wanted to see what would happen next. The days that followed were quiet. Too quiet for her. The alien girl had lived in noise. The constant shouts of the market. The clanging of chains. The sound of other captives fighting to survive. Silence felt dangerous, like it was waiting for something to break. The human worked most of the day, fixing tools, mending clothes, sometimes leaving for short trips into the city. She stayed in the small house, pacing, testing the windows, checking the door locks when he wasn't looking. Every day she thought about running. Every day she told herself she was only staying until she could find a safer place. But every night, she found herself under the same blanket, in the same bed, and every morning she awoke to the smell of food he cooked. She also tested him small things at first. She accidentally knocked over a shelf, spilling jars onto the floor. He didn't yell, just picked them up with her in silence. She hid one of his tools in a cupboard to see if he would get angry. He found it hours later, and only said, "If you're bored, I can teach you to use it." The lack of reaction confused her. She was used to buyers who hit or shouted over the smallest mistake. This man didn't play by those rules. It made her uneasy. It also made her curious. One afternoon, rain began to fall, heavy and cold. She sat by the window, watching it splash against the dirt road. The human was outside, repairing a fence despite the storm. She didn't understand why he didn't just wait for the weather to pass. Finally, she stepped outside, crossing her arms against the rain. "You'll get sick," she said sharply. He glanced at her, water dripping from his hair. "Fence won't fix itself," he replied. She stood there for a moment, then grabbed a hammer from the ground. Without another word, she started helping. The rain soaked them both, but they worked until the fence stood straight again. When they went inside, dripping water on the floor, he gave her a towel without comment. For some reason, that simple gesture stayed in her mind long after the rain stopped. That night, as he sat by the fire, sharpening a knife, she asked, "Why don't you lock the door when you sleep?" He didn't look up. "Do I need to?" he asked. She hesitated. "You don't know me. I know enough," he said. She frowned. "Enough to trust me." He finally met her eyes. "Enough to see you're more than they say you are." Her chest tightened. No one had ever spoken to her like that, as if she was more than the wild, dangerous creature the market called her. She looked away quickly, not wanting him to see the confusion on her face. Over the next days, she started doing small things without thinking, filling his water jug before he asked, bringing in firewood when the pile ran low, cleaning the table after meals. Each time, she told herself it didn't mean anything. It was just something to pass the time. But she knew deep down, it was more than that. One evening, she heard a noise outside, low, weak, almost like a whimper. She followed the sound and found a small, injured animal near the fence. Its fur was matted with blood, one leg bent at an odd angle. Before she could decide what to do, the human appeared beside her. Without hesitation, he knelt and gently scooped the creature into his arms. "Bring a cloth," he said, his voice calm but urgent. Inside, he cleaned the wound, wrapping it with careful hands. She watched, puzzled. Why waste time on something so small and useless? "Why help it?" she asked. "Because it's hurt," he said simply. She didn't reply, but she kept staring at the animal, now curled in a basket by the fire. She remembered the way he had lifted it, the same way he had unchained her, and for the first time, the anger in her chest felt a little smaller. That night, she didn't stay on her side of the bed. She moved the blanket slightly, letting it cover them both. The human didn't react, didn't even open his eyes, but she noticed the corner of his mouth twitch upward in the faintest smile. The morning started like any other. The human packed a small bag for the market, and the alien girl followed without being asked. She had grown used to walking beside him, The stares from the crowd didn't bother her as much anymore. If anyone whispered, she just looked them in the eye until they turned away. The market was busier than usual. Colorful banners hung across the alleys, vendors shouting louder than normal. She scanned the crowd out of habit, watching hands, eyes, the way people moved. It was the way she had survived for years. The human seemed calm, but she could tell he was alert too. They stopped at a stall, selling dried meat. While the human spoke to the vendor, she stayed to the side, picking at a loose thread on her scarf. That's when she heard the voice. Well, look who's walking free. Her body stiffened before she even turned. 3 alien men stood behind her, tall and broad, their skin mottled with scars. She knew them thugs who sometimes worked for the market guards. One of them grinned, showing sharp yellow teeth. Didn't think anyone was stupid enough to buy you, he said. Another laughed. Wonder how much you'll pay when we bring you back. She backed up a step, but they moved closer. The human was still talking to the vendor, unaware, or maybe just pretending not to notice. One of the thugs reached for her arm. Her instincts flared, and she swung, catching his wrist and twisting hard. He yelped, but the others grabbed her. Pinning her arms, she kicked out, hitting one in the leg, but there were too many hands on her. Too much weight. The first thug leaned close, his breath hot and foul. You bit the wrong people before, he growled. We're going to fix that mouth of yours. And then, the pressure on her arms was gone. The human was there, moving. Faster than she had ever seen. He caught one thug by the collar and slammed him into the side of the stall. The second thug swung at him, but the human ducked and drove his fist into the alien's gut. The sound was heavy. Final, the thug doubled over, gasping for air. The last one tried to grab the girl again. She reacted without thinking, biting his hand so hard she tasted blood. He screamed and stumbled back. Before he could recover, the human stepped between them, his eyes cold. Touch her again, he said, his voice low but carrying, and you'll lose more than a hand. For a moment, no one moved. The thugs looked at each other, weighing their chances. Then, muttering curses, they backed away, melting into the crowd. The human didn't. Watch them go. His focus was on her. Are you hurt? He asked, scanning her arms for bruises. She shook her head, still breathing hard, but her chest felt tight for a different reason. No one had ever stepped in for her before, not without expecting something in return, and he had done it without hesitation. The vendor, who had been frozen in place, finally exhaled. You two should get out of here, he said nervously. The human nodded, taking her arm not roughly, but firmly, and leading her away from the crowd. They didn't speak until they were halfway home. She was the first to break the silence. You could have walked away, she said. I could have, he replied, but I didn't. Her voice was quieter when she asked, why? He glanced at her. Because you're mine to protect. The words made her heart jump. She didn't know if she liked the way he said mine. Part of her bristled at it, but another part didn't mind at all. Back at the house, she sat by the fire while he cleaned a scrape on her wrist. It was small, barely bleeding, but he handled it as if it were serious. His hands were steady, his touch gentle. When he was done, she muttered, I could have handled them, I know, he said, with a faint smile. But sometimes it's easier with two. That night, she lay awake for a long time, listening to the soft sound of his breathing. The image of him stepping into the fight replayed in her mind again and again. She had been ready to bite and scratch her way free, like always, but for the first time, she hadn't been alone in the fight, and that felt dangerous in a different way. The days after the fight at the market were different. The alien girl no longer kept her distance when they walked through the city. She still stayed alert, still scanned every alley and corner, but now she walked closer to the human, not because she needed to, she told herself, but because it felt safer. Back at the house, he didn't talk about the fight. He didn't ask for thanks, didn't make it a big story. It was as if it had been just another part of the day. like buying food or fixing the fence, but for her, it had been something more. No one had ever fought with her before, only against her. One morning, as the fire warmed the small room, the human handed her a small bundle wrapped in cloth. She unwrapped it slowly and found a set of clothes, not chains, not rags from the market, but soft fabric in deep earthy colors. A tunic, loose trousers, and a scarf for her hair. "They're yours," he said, "if you want them." She ran her fingers over the fabric. "Why?" she asked. "You look less like a target when you're not wearing what the market gave you," he replied. She changed in the other room. When she stepped out, the clothes fit well, and the scarf framed her golden eyes. He didn't say much, just gave a small nod, but she caught the faintest curve of his mouth, almost a smile. The new clothes made her feel different, not exactly free, but less like someone else's property. She started moving around the house with more purpose. When the human worked, she watched closely, learning without asking. She learned how to sharpen a knife, how to mend a tear in cloth, and how to carry a heavy bucket without spilling a drop. One afternoon, he handed her a short wooden staff. "Show me how you fight," he said. She smirked. "You sure you want to see that?" He stepped back, giving her space. She swung the staff in sharp, fast motions, feet moving like she was dancing around invisible enemies. When she stopped, he nodded. "You're quick, but you waste energy," he said, then showed her how to turn her movements into shorter, more powerful strikes. She learned fast, and for the first time. They laughed together when she nearly knocked the staff out of his hand. Her confidence began to grow, not just in fighting, but in the small things, cooking a meal without burning it, speaking to strangers without looking like she might attack them. The human noticed, though he didn't say much. Sometimes, he would give her a look that said more than words, a quiet approval she had never felt before. A week later, they went to the market again. This time, she wore her new clothes and walked with her head high. The whispers were still there, but quieter. Some people stared, others quickly looked away. She ignored them all, focusing on the stalls and the sound of merchants calling out their goods. They passed the same spice vendor from before. This time, when she reached for a jar, the vendor didn't slap her hand away. Instead, he glanced at the human, then nodded as if he knew better than to cause trouble. She smiled faintly, not a friendly smile, but a victorious one. At the far end of the market, she froze. The fat merchant who had once owned her was there, his injured hand still wrapped in a leather cover. He saw her, and his face twisted in shock. "You," he spat. "How are you still?" The human stepped forward, calm but firm. "She's not yours," he said. The merchant's eyes darted between them, calculating, but in the end, he stepped aside without a word. She felt a rush of satisfaction as they walked past him without looking back. Back at the house that evening, she sat by the fire. "You didn't have to say anything to him," she said. "I know," the human replied, "but I wanted him to know you're not alone anymore." Her hands tightened around the mug she was holding. She didn't answer, but in her chest, something warm started to replace the cold she had carried for so long. That night, when the fire burned low, she lay in bed and whispered into the dark, "I'm not leaving." The human didn't reply. Maybe he hadn't heard, but she knew, even without his answer, that staying was no longer just about safety. It was about something she couldn't name yet, something she wasn't ready to give up. Weeks passed. The alien girl was no longer the snarling, chain-bound creature the market had known. She still had the same golden eyes, sharp and watchful, but now they carried something else. Control. Her steps were steady, her shoulders no longer tense with constant fear. The human had not tried to change who she was. He had only given her space to choose what she wanted to be. The small house felt different now. It wasn't just his home, it was their home. She cooked sometimes, he fixed things, and together they made the place feel alive. Even the injured animal they had rescued weeks ago had healed, and now roamed the yard freely. Some nights they spoke by the fire, other nights they sat in silence, and that silence felt safe, not empty. One morning, the human told her, "We need to go to the market again." She didn't hesitate. "All right," she said, tying her scarf around her hair. This time, she didn't walk a step behind him. She walked beside him. Their pace matched. The market was busy as always, but this time, something was different. The people stared, yes, but there was no laughter, no mocking whispers. The wild alien girl was gone. In her place stood someone calm, strong, and unafraid. The human's presence beside her was enough to make even the boldest troublemakers look away. They bought what they needed, food, cloth, and a few tools. At one stall, a young merchant stared at her nervously and muttered, "You're not what they said you were." She tilted her head. "And what did they say?" "That you were untamable," he said quietly. Her lips curved into a faint smile. "I am," she replied, "just not in the way they think." As they made their way toward the edge of the market, she saw him, the fat merchant who had once held her chain. His injured hand was now fully healed, though a faint scar marked where she had bitten him. When he saw her, his eyes widened. For a moment, he looked ready to speak. But then he saw the human beside her, and whatever words he had died in his throat, she stopped in front of him. Her golden eyes locked on his. "You used to pull my chain," she said, voice steady. "Now, I pull my own path." He said nothing, and she turned away without waiting for a reply. The walk home was quiet, but it was the good kind of quiet. When they reached the house, she placed the market bag on the table and sat by the fire. He joined her, stretching his legs out. "You didn't have to say anything to him," the human said. "I know," she replied, "but I wanted him to." Here at that night, the firelight flickered across the room. She looked at him and spoke the words she had been holding for weeks. "I'm staying." He didn't look surprised. "I figured you would," he said, a small smile in his voice. "Not because I owe you," she added quickly. "I know," he said again. She leaned back, her gaze steady on him. "Because I choose to." The words hung between them, warm and unshakable. She was still fierce, still ready to fight if needed, but now her strength had focus. Not the wild, desperate fight for survival. It was the strength of someone who had been given freedom and decided to use it. Later, as the fire burned low, the wind rattled the shutters. The human rose to check the door, but she stopped him. "It's fine," she said. "We're safe." He looked at her, then nodded and sat back down. For the first time, she had said the word safe and believed it. In the morning, they would go about their lives, fixing, cooking, walking to the market when needed. The world outside would still remember the wild alien girl who had bitten a merchant's finger. But those who saw her now would remember something else too, that even the fiercest spirit could be trusted. Not because she was broken, but because she chose who to stand beside. She was untamable, but to him, she was home.